hope. Wow, guys, that's good news, isn't it? The hope that's the anchor of our soul, the hope that lives in us, the hope that comes from suffering, that develops perseverance and character. Hope is good. It's sustaining encouragement, right? Like we have faith on the front end and we have love on the back end, and the inside is about the sustainable encouragement. And that's the hope that's in us. Amen. And I can tell you that I'm up here to share my story. I worked really hard on my testimony, I just want to say. I could probably focus on a lot of data points from my youth. And depending on which set of data points I look at, you guys could be like, wow, like you were born with a silver spoon. And then another set of data points, you could say, wow, I wouldn't trade for that. There was a lot of trauma. My mom was called into missions at 14, and she walked away from the Lord until my senior year at Southeastern. So I was raised in quite a bit of brokenness, but she loved me as best she could. And as you know, brokenness goes from generation to generation. So some of the healing, transformational things that I had to go through later in life was working through understanding and accepting her brokenness and that how much she loved me. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But growing up in that, there was a lot of emotional and fractures and gaps that occurred because the enemy is happy to exploit our environment, what we grow up in, our experience in life. He's happy to exploit that and create fractures and agreements and vows and things that don't quite make sense so that he can continue to exploit them as we move into life and we do not trust the Lord and we get farther from him. And I was pretty much raised in church, even though my mom didn't raise me. I had an amazing grandmother. My mom didn't raise me in church, but she wanted me in church. She just didn't necessarily want it at home. So I was under the influence of church and a loving grandmother my entire life. And when you have a lot of trauma in your life, you can tend to go in and out and ebb and flow between I love Jesus, I'm going to act crazy, and I love Jesus, and I'm going to act crazy. And it's a very broken process. But all along, I always knew he loved me. That was one thing I knew for sure. So when I got to be 18 years old, November 19th, 1985, I gave my life to him, hands down. I just wanted to give it all to him. I walked away from everything that I thought I shouldn't be doing. I entered into a life of do's and don'ts. It came very easy to me. By the time I was 18 and a half, I was on my way to Bible college. My grandmother was thrilled, and my family was like, what is this phase she is going through? So at 18 and a half, I go off to Southeastern Bible College. I am loving the Lord. I'm sold out. I love him. He is the only thing that ever offered me security, protection, unconditional love. He made reckless abandon a safe place for me, and that's all I wanted was all of him. And my life and decisions were very easy for me. If the Lord said, do it, yes, Lord. If the Lord said, don't do it, I said, okay, Lord. Sacrifice, obedience, seemed very simple, very easy, and I had zero compassion for anyone who struggled otherwise because it didn't make sense to me. I had never had anything master me since I gave my life to the Lord. I had never had anything be difficult for me. I didn't care what it was, and I never in my life, even though I went through all kinds of trauma and abuse, including sexual abuse as a child, I never had any same-sex affection, same-sex attraction. You know, I wish they called it back then that, because it kind of sounds kinder and gentler than what they used to when I was younger. But I never had any of those kind of feelings. I had a lot of other mixed up emotional feelings, and I had a lot of other difficulties in trying to understand rejection, love, boundaries, being good enough or too much and not enough of something. But I didn't struggle with that. So I went to Bible college, and I loved the Lord. I made a great group of friends, people that really loved God, and I loved him, and I loved unpacking his word, and I loved doing all of these amazing things with him. And I used to ask him, Lord, I just want it to be me and you. I really don't want to deal with people. Can't me and you just have a life? I don't trust people. They're not nice. They're betray you. They're not a guarantee. They're so unpredictable. And I know that you are like a sure thing. So why can't it just be me and you? And I remember me sitting laying in the prayer room with my pillow and my journal and my Bible. And I'm just crying and saying, I just want it to be me and you. He said, yeah, that's not working that way. It's not going to be that way. I said, well, I don't want to have to do friendships and have to be vulnerable and just do all that thing. I just don't want to have to do it. He said, Maria, if I had that model for Christ, of the 1, the 3, the 12, the multitude, if I had that model for him, you need to do it as well. And I said, I don't want to, but I will. And on began my journey about relationships and my desire for relational IQ and leadership and the things of God and all the things that I really, really wanted to enjoy in life. The problem was I didn't have the emotional capacity to keep up with what I was wanting. There was things that needed to be dealt with in my life. College is kind of like a bubble, Bible college is. So there wasn't a ton of things for me to unpack there. My life really didn't have full experience yet out in the world. I was whisked off to Bible college before I had a chance to really experience any major adversity while in my relationship with God. So, of course, I did what every college student woman does. I got engaged my senior year. And when I got engaged, went home to Orlando. I got married a year later, and my life, I can just tell you, anybody who ever feels like marriage is the invasion of Normandy is not meant to be married. Okay, can I just tell you that? Marriage was not what I was envisioning in my head. And my mom, I loved her to death, but her testimony was the woman at the well. She was married 5 times. In my senior year in college, she was living with the 6th, and that's when she gave her life to the Lord. So I didn't really understand commitment or resolve either at that point. So I had some emotional and commitment challenges as I was growing up. So when I got married, about 3 months, 90 days into getting married, there were a lot of distractions. I remember sitting on the couch and thinking, I'm crying. And my husband is like, what's the matter? I said, I really made a bad decision. And he said, is it me? I said, no, you're great. This was just really a bad idea. And I don't know, that didn't set well with him. And and so I really, I had only known my relationship with God, honestly, and my relationship with godly friends in college. So it was really hard for me to have the distraction of managing a marriage, a relationship like that, while trying to manage my walk with the Lord. And, I was used to being able to spend time with him whenever I wanted. I wasn't used to having all these other responsibilities and running a house and having obligations, having to ask somebody if I can spend money and, just all this stuff. It just seemed like nothing was mine, ever going to be mine ever again. And I didn't have my relationship with the Lord long enough, strong enough to handle living life in distractions that I was going to face. And on top of all of that, and my ex-husband was he was a good guy. And I felt bad that he got the end of the stick that I gave him, because when you're immature emotionally and you suffer from rejection and abandonment and all these different broken issues, the other person doesn't stand a chance. Can I just say? That person doesn't stand a chance. They're never going to be good enough. Anything they do or don't do or can't read your mind, you're convinced they don't love you enough, and they meant to do that, and it's going to be that way forever because you don't understand resolve and you don't understand how you build relationship. If I hadn't seen that done. So I was very dissatisfied for unrealistic reasons, right? But nevertheless, they were my reasons in being married and being fulfilled emotionally. So I had somebody approach me And I felt pretty safe. You know, we like to make a lot of declarations. The enemy's not afraid of our declarations, and he's not afraid of our emotions. He just has to bow to the word. So it doesn't matter what we declare and how emotionally we declare it. If we're not declaring the word, it doesn't matter. And so I declared, well, I'm straight, and I'm married, and I'm a Christian, so sorry. That didn't last long. That was a baseless declaration, but I found safety in that. But I was drawn to all of the emotional stuff. I was drawn to it. And I was so emotionally immature, I couldn't see what was happening. I just could only, like Ann talked about the train of life, my emotions were not the caboose. They were the engine of the train. And I never made a good emotional decision in my life. I don't know about you guys. So about 6 months later, I felt differently. I saw things differently. The enemy had creeped in, compromised my ideas, my thoughts, what I was willing to do, even just to get out of marriage, because I wasn't able to focus on it, and I didn't have anyone to mentor me or help me try to work through this to figure out what resolve looks like. So I walked away from my marriage. I walked away from my relationship with God. And I bankrupted my life on every level, relationally, financially, emotionally, spiritually, over the next 7 years. And my mom, she had just given her life to the Lord a year later, and she's like, what is going on? I mean, all this time, I finally come around, and now you're doing this? What is this about? And of course, my family's like, oh, it's another phase. So I said, Mom, you know, I'm not gay. It's just this one person. How many of it's just this one person. It's just these one feelings I have. So when that relationship ended, my mom thought, oh, Victory Town, until I picked my next girlfriend. So this went on for 7 years. And my mom asked me to come to church. And the whole time during those 7 years, I never changed in my mind what I thought was truth. I never called evil good. During those 7 years, I knew I loved God. And I don't know how this is going to fit in your theology. I can just tell you this is my experience. I loved God with all my heart. I wanted to be free. I had never been mastered by anything, and I couldn't get away from what was mastering my life emotionally and physically and sexually. I couldn't get away from that. And all I kept doing was self-medicating and compounding the problem with more high-risk behaviors and creating more addictions and more issues and more things that I was going to have to unravel to try to get free. And my mom was like, Maria, what is going on? And my aunt would say, Maria, what happened to you? I said, I don't know. Talk to David. He walked for 40 years with God and dealt with Bathsheba. I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. But I know I can't get free. But when that time comes that I feel like I can, I'm going for it. And I kept asking the Lord, please help me. Please, I want out. And I just couldn't lay any of it down. And I can't explain that. I loved God. I just couldn't lay it down. But I never went now I did go to, I'm not going to lie, I did go to Southeastern Library. And I used every biblical tool in the library to try to figure out a way around this and make sure that it was going to be acceptable. Yeah, it's not there. I'm just telling you. It's not there. It doesn't matter. Monogamous relationships, lust versus love. I looked at every angle possible, and I'm a pretty good wordsmither and thinker, and I couldn't find a way. So I did try, but I couldn't deny the truth. So one night, my mom asked me, I want you to come to church. And I said, okay, I'll go. And I brought me, my girlfriend, her whole family. We all go marching into the pew. And you know what was going on at church? Heaven's gates and hell's flames. So we're all sitting there, and all of us can fit into one of the vignettes there. You know, all of us can fit one of the vignettes. The difference for me is I didn't fit into any of those vignettes. I loved God, and I missed my communion with him. I missed my fellowship with him. I missed the lover of my soul that gave me hope every day, no matter what was going on. That's what I missed. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't fearful. It wasn't a heavy conviction that said, I got to get this all out of my life. Actually, that night, it was just, I just want you. I just want you back. And I got up from my chair and I walked to the altar. And for the next half hour, I think the only thing I could say with my hands lifted high was, It's all for you. All this, it's all for you. It's all for you. And I couldn't stop saying it. And then the song that we sang was, I went to the enemy's camp and I took back what he stole from me. And I felt that that was the truth of what God was going to do in my life. And I remember all my girlfriend and our whole family were all up at the altar. Everybody got saved that night. So I'm walking out to the car, smoking a cigarette. I look over and I say, life's about to change. And I knew it was going to change. And it took about 16, 18 months to get some of the residue that most church folk would say is acceptable to be in church while you're behaving that way. It took about 18 months to get that residue out of my life, the big rocks that most people will say. Although how many of you know that the rocks that you get to deal with in your life are the one God prioritizes for you, not the one that the people in the church say you have to fix right then. Trust God with his priorities and the rocks in your jar. And so it took about 18 months for me to get all the drug and sexing and all of that stuff out of my life, where I looked a little bit more presentable in the way that I was going to church. But my mom didn't care. My mom loved me so well during that time. She never, ever tried to polarize me with conversation. She just wanted to love me. She loved whoever I was with. She just sewed into my life. And when it came time for me to go to the altar, there was no barriers between my relationship with her. Our relationship just picked up, and God began a healing relationship that would benefit me exponentially until the day that she passed 3.5 years ago. She was an amazing woman. But that was only the beginning of the journey. The rest of the journey that I'm still on, that is packed with transformation, is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow at 1:30 at my workshop. It's about the great exchange where the Lord offers us a trade. He offers us a trade for all the carnal things that we've developed in our lives that the enemy was happy to put in our tool belt of life for self-preservation and protection and safety in the way the world sees it. And he offers us a trade for the rest of our life for each tool, each thing that we use in the process when we carnally met that need. And he turns around and he says, no, you don't have to do it that way. I got a better way for you that satisfies you deeper than you can imagine. That's the trade he gives us. That's the great exchange. And it's going to be that way for the rest of our life. And we're going to be learning more and more ways to live the life of freedom that he died for us to live here in this world, in full relationship with one another, in abundant relationship with him. That's the glory of God. That's my story.